Imagine a horizontal line. On this end you've got 1,000, and on the other you've got 1 billion. Without anything in between being labeled, if you had to guess, about where would you place 1 million? Now don't think too hard about it, just pick about where feels right, you know? For me, it was somewhere around here. I'm not sure why, but maybe it was for you too. Maybe you have a great number sense and it was clearly here, and of course, you'd be right. You win. But what's fascinating is that in a 2013 study at the University of Richmond, around 50% of participants drew their line somewhere in the middle here. There was a sense in many people that there is a uniform linear space between each of these big number words, that 1,000, million, billion, and trillion are all kind of the same distance from each other when in fact there's 1,000 millions in a billion. It's not near as pretty as our minds seem to mistake them to be. Of course, it seems obvious when you put it like that, right? Of course it's not halfway. That doesn't actually make sense. You just hadn't thought about the depth of those numbers, really. But if you made the same error I did, then you've just grazed the surface of something that I like to call the Puny Paradox. Numbers and video games go together like fighting prowess and Waffle House employees. Without the first, you don't qualify to be the second. Even if your favorite game doesn't deal in numbers outwardly, there are values dictating how high you can jump, how fast you can move, how long you can climb, how soon you can block, how slow you can dodge. But the number most of us find ourselves primarily concerned with is damage. How devastating of a blow are you landing or taking? And I've always been enamored by the choice developers make when deciding what numbers represent that damage. You can go as low as Paper Mario and have mostly single digits represent these moves, or as high as whatever the hell is going on in MapleStory. But it's interesting to me because ultimately it all fills the same purpose, to signify how powerful an attack is. So if you're making a game and you want an attack to appear absolutely catastrophic, you should beef that number up just as high as you can possibly get it. Oh. Okay. Or maybe you don't. You see folks, this is a video I've had on the back burner for a while. People have emailed me about it. I found this heavily debated tweet about it. I've pondered it since my zit-riddled middle school face stared at a boss repeatedly tanking 9,999 damage and felt empty. This is the Puny Paradox, this strange tendency for damage values to somehow hit harder for some people if the game deals in smaller numbers. When bombastic rows of 9s just lack the same impact as a 4-4 with double strike to the face, or a critical 168 off of a spell. And maybe you felt this yourself before. If so, I'd love to know about it down below. But to uncover what exactly causes this, I've dug up some psych research, a few anecdotes, a handful of absurd examples that show just how to make big numbers feel as big as they truly are, and basically just help us wrap our minds around the Puny Paradox. If that sounds fun, grab a snack, take a deep seat, get cozy, and while you're doing that, I need to... Oh, that's right. This video is sponsored by the Big Bad Toy Store. Listen, I'll be honest, collecting toys and figures is a hobby I've never really given much thought to. But when I am sent a tremendously detailed, beautiful rendition of 2B that I get to then place on my desk and annoy my wife with, that changes a man. And it really is the detail that I think has me wanting to collect more of these. I mean, just look at Cloud's sword here. Here's the skinny, folks. Big Bad Toy Store is the place to go if you're obsessed with this stuff like I am now, or want to become obsessed with it. They've been around since '99, and they carry products from countless of your favorite IPs, all at varying price points to meet your needs. You like anime? It goes without saying. If that's cringe but you have DC stuff, they can help you get more. Nintendo? You already know. Street Fighter? This is already in my cart. Transformers? Put on some Stan Bush and get to clicking. This is truly the open world game of websites, because no matter how many times you think you've seen it all, you stumble upon something new and go, I didn't know they had Oshinoko stuff too. And you know what the mind-boggling part is? No matter what you order, it's $4 to ship it. Flat rate. If you order Pikachu, $4 shipping. If you order 100 Pikachus, $4 shipping. Don't know why anyone would want to order 100 of something. That seems insane.
$4 is $4.
So if you'd like to jump off the deep end with me and fill your space with the things you love, then be sure to use my link in the description and give Big Bad Toy Store a visit. Pop it open in a new tab and take a look around. You know you want to. Thanks again to Big Bad Toy Store for the sponsor. Now back to the show. What convinced me to finally make this video was that a few weeks ago, some friends tried to get me back into Yu-Gi-Oh! I haven't played since high school, but I downloaded Master Duel and started running the ones. Now, I'm a long-time Magic the Gathering player, so I can't help but immediately make comparisons as I go. And one of the first things I notice is how much I'm just discounting these monsters that are doing like 16, 17, 18, 1900 damage. In my mind, I've equated them to little 2/2s. They come out early game, usually they set up other stuff or just poke you for small damage. For context, in a 1v1 game of most formats, Yu-Gi-Oh! You begin with 8,000 life, and in Magic you begin with 20. So if you do the math, the 2 you're taking from that early game creature is 1/10 of your life in Magic, but that 18 or 1900 is almost 1/4 of your life in Yu-Gi-Oh! And realizing this kind of gave me whiplash because I was sort of categorizing these early game pings the same. In Magic, getting hit by like a 4/4 and taking 4 damage feels like a big chunk, and paradoxically still feels bigger than a 1900 monster even though 4 is still below 1/4 of your health. Of course, this is subjective. It may not be that way for everyone. And there are other factors to be sure, like how 4/4s are harder to put into play than these high 1000s monsters, the fact that in Magic you can choose not to block, and that in Yu-Gi-Oh! You typically just use these little guys as summon material, but I mean, life gain is way more common in Magic, and yet taking that little 1900, devastating as it mathematically truly is, just doesn't hit quite like a 4 or 5 would in Magic. At least to my simple ass. But maybe you've felt this in RPGs in some form or fashion. The lower values in Baldur's Gate to many folks conjures up a much bigger reaction than the rows and rows of numbers you deal in Genshin. Despite the numbers being bigger, they just mean less somehow, and I think that's because of 2 things: tangibility and specificity. The line from the start of this video illustrates tangibility pretty well. Million and billion and trillion are just words to us. It's hard for our minds to truly grasp the magnitude of a billion. Sure, a game can do that just fine. Damage multipliers and buffs and enemy debuffs can all come together and automatically calculate a very specific damage value based on your setup and situation, which is spectacular. But we can only take the game's word for it on the true impact of that attack. It's extremely hard to conceptualize this many anything, right? Try and realistically imagine how big a pile of that many toasters would be. If I gave you a few minutes, you could come up with an idea, but what about this many toasters? You can count that high, and you can imagine 6 of a lot of things. In an interview with NPR, educational neuroscientist Elizabeth Tumarian says that our human brains are pretty bad at comprehending larger numbers because our brains are evolutionarily very old, and we are pushing them to do things that we've only just recently conceptualized. From a survival standpoint, it's important to be able to count things in the real world, right? How many wolves over there? Which tree has more fruit? How many logs of firewood do I have left? But beyond a handful, Tumarian says we make more mistakes. We're really processing numbers past 4 or even 5 in a totally different way. We actually might even be using a different brain system altogether. Long story short, it's easier for our minds to be afraid of 4 damage at 20 life than 1900 damage at 8000 because the first equation here is much more tangible. It's an equation that feels natural to solve because it's simple to picture 20-somethings instead of 8,000 somethings. And when you guys hear that too, right? Oh, hang on, I know what that is. Shh, it's okay, it's okay. There's a counter-argument. To pump the brakes and address the attractive person currently typing, it's actually not that complicated at all. You see, my good sir, you can just remove the zeros and then it's 19 damage at 80 life. And you'd be right, that's much easier to wrap your head around. I can more readily imagine 80 things than I can 8,000. But let's go the other direction with this for a second, just to stick with the idea of perspective. What if we took that 20 life and multiplied it by 400, getting us 8,000, and we took that 4 damage and did the same thing, giving us 1,600 damage? Cool, that helps me come to terms with 1900. Maybe I'll be better at Master Duel now. But if we do the opposite and divide the Yu-Gi-Oh damage by 400, we get oh no. Oh no! The beauty of lower numbers is not just that they are easier to imagine, but also because they're specific. The more digits you start throwing on the end of life totals and damage values, the more opportunity there is for more complicated calculations and numbers that aren't easily divisible. Which is a problem in a game where you have to keep a life total or take strategic turns based on how much an attack may do. Can you do these routine calculations? Of course you can, but will you every time? Or will you guess? Will you round? When numbers get bigger like this, they lead you to estimate, which is something your brain does when it doesn't want to do the work. And when your brain doesn't want to do the work, it's not going to grasp the magnitude of all of these colossal values. Despite how ostentatiously they're displayed, they won't mean anything unless you can conceptualize how big they actually are in this fight, which is a problem that can be fixed with one of these. What if I didn't label these ends and instead just did this, and then labeled it 1 million damage? When you see this, your brain begins to churn in a completely different direction, because while our minds are bad at visualizing big numbers, they are extremely good at comparing size. If this is 1 million, how much is this whole thing? It has to be several hundred million. I mean, this is only a sliver. It's a much more comfortable question than the one we started with today. And if I put this line in front of a boss, you'd know that you have your work cut out for you. Well, it's a health bar, Daryl, you raggedy bitch. I see what you did there. This is why you see these things everywhere. They take what can be really any number and then immediately put it in a size-based perspective for you. There's a reason your first encounter with the boss in Elden Ring usually involves you asking, okay, what am I hitting for? And then checking to see what you're hitting for. The number matters much less than the proportion of the total health they represent. The very first health bar, arguably, was in the RPG game The Black Onyx, released in Japan in 1984. It is said to have influenced the health bar as we know it today, and it really is a tremendous invention that I think we kind of take for granted nowadays. For any type of game that stems from the D&D role-playing numerical damage family tree, once upon a time, health totals and life totals had to be kept manually or completely numerically. There was no easy-to-grasp visual proportion. Instead, there was an actual value that you'd glance at and make a decision on. I'm sure you're aware of the mounting research suggesting that people tend to spend way more money if they are swiping a card than if they spend cash, and I think this happens for the same reason. Cash is a literal representation of your resources. When you physically see it disappear like your life in a bar, it hurts. It adds meaning to that number on the register. It's not just some nebulous amount that you technically know but can't visualize. Hey, do you think if your debit card had a life bar of your bank account on it, you'd stop buying so much bullshit? And because we're so spoiled on health bars nowadays, numerical values on attacks almost seem irrelevant, don't they? I mean, think about where your eyes go in any given fight in Xenoblade Chronicles. You might happen to catch some values here or there, but when you swing for a big attack, your eyes are instantly glued to the health bar to see what difference it made. When you aren't navigating a menu and you're waiting for your ATB to refill in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you're staring a hole through right about here. Or here. The question then becomes, are damage values actually just irrelevant? If a meter is here, do we really need to see what the values truly are? There are two answers, a technical one and a stylistic one. The technical one is, of course we do, because regardless of how many digits, they do still serve a purpose outside of flair. I need to know if this jump attack does more than this running heavy in Elden Ring, because I've only got so many openings against this boss. I think the jump does do more for poise break, but it's another data point in my strategy. If I'm brainstorming combos in a fighter, I need to be able to compare between them to see which is the optimal route for more damage. So yes, of course we do need the numbers from a technical standpoint, but also from a stylistic one, I think there's something juicy that can be done with them as well. There's this giant snail boss you fight in Crosscode, right? And like any other big enemy, you eventually figure out the attack pattern and where it's weak. So you break it, wail on it, all according to plan, and then you notice, that health bar is not budging. Now, we've seen this film before, right? A boss is tanking your hits, the defense is too high, there's some plot that needs to happen so you can actually start dealing damage. Here's the thing, you are dealing damage. It's not just a few stubby zeros, this number is racking up, but the bar isn't budging. Okay, so how much health does it have? Is this a fucking joke? Yeah, the Gastropolis actually has just shy of 160 quadrillion health points. Here's that number written out fully if you're curious. And of course you can't conceptualize how stupidly big that number is, though it does explain why this health bar isn't budging. With some plotty shenanigans, your friend is able to exploit the virtual world your character is in and exponentially increase your damage output. So for the remainder of the fight, you're dealing these ridiculous numbers with each blow, and wouldn't you know it, the health bar is moving. It's silly and it's bombastic and it's a power trip, but because you never deal anywhere close to this damage, and because of the meter translating these gargantuan numbers into something that you can readily wrap your mind around, they actually feel as large as they are. Another thing that makes this example so fun is that it delivers these values through a silly plot device which coats the moment in a layer of authenticity and intent. I think one reason a ton of people get burned out on large damage values is because of power creep. The need for live service games to continue putting out more and more powerful characters and weapons, constantly pushing the bill and the meta further and further until eventually all of that new damage just comes off as noise, the new norm, not something unique or genuinely catastrophic. In those instances, health bars can't really fix the Puny Paradox, but if done intentionally to shock, big damage does absolutely feel big. Something interesting happens though if you remove the health bar, because without that visual aid, these numbers have to tell the story on their own. One of the biggest contributing factors to the Puny Paradox is that many of us grew up in an era of RPGs where enemies didn't have a health bar or maybe didn't reveal their health at all. There are still games that do this today to add tension to battles. But when you're constantly hurling these seemingly large numbers and cinematic spectacles of attacks at them and they continually tank them in these long, slow, classic RPG encounters, the numbers start to become less and less significant. When enemies are damage sponges, those rows of digits become a formality, and that's not how they should feel. Especially considering what we've already said about how our minds struggle to conceptualize large numbers. And that's one thing I've always appreciated about the old Alpha Dream Mario and Luigi games. They typically didn't reveal the boss's HP, which kept things tense and kept you guessing on how much longer you need to hang on, but it also just kept the values low. The final boss of Partners in Time, for example, is 3000 HP. That's it. Compare that to Sephiroth, which is 80,000 but can be up to 400,000 apparently. But with her health in this neighborhood, instead of each attack being 4 or more digits, you'd still, at the end of the game, only be hitting for a couple of hundred on any given turn. Plus, the way many attacks are formatted helps you put in context how much damage you are really dealing. Like if you use copy flowers, instead of a big cinematic attack and a 600, you'd have to time button presses just right and try to stack it up for damage. So it would go 24, 12, 24, 24, 12, 17, 25, 13, 12, 24, 12, 47, 17, 24, 24, 24, 24, 13, 12, 17, 13, 24, 24, 24, which is just a clever way to fully illustrate the depth of that 722 you just earned. And I love this idea of sort of working in reverse to illustrate the gravity of an attack or a score in a game, because it doesn't require a health bar for you to understand how big the value really is. Balatro is a lovely example of working in reverse like this. It's a little indie roguelike where each round you unlock some cards, juice up your deck, add some jokers that will multiply your score based on a few factors, and then try to put together poker hands that rack up silly numbers. It's addicting because it's simple to pick up, but goes extremely deep the more time you put into it. To progress, you have to beat the score listed on each of these blinds with only a set number of hands. And it would have been really easy for the developer to give you a score preview on any given hand. Hey, this is how much this hand is worth. Or even give you a progress bar that shows you how much this hand would fill the score you need to progress. But the developer LocalThunk purposely decided not to do this because the thrill of the game is this. Watching the hand's value multiply each card's individual values and then be multiplied by all of the jokers you have on this build, and finally arriving at a number that you do not know but hope is enough to progress. The number you arrive at is far less interesting than the path you built to get there. Regardless of how big it really is or if you can conceptualize it, you perceive it as massive because of all the factors leading up to it that you can conceptualize. Shout out to Mark for the spectacular research on that one. And it's things like these that get around the Puny Paradox that give these immense values the aura they properly deserve. If there is no health bar, there should be something that helps you understand just how important that number really is. Maybe it's dialogue of the boss getting tired. Maybe it's breaking the number down into bite-sized pieces. Maybe it's just using a health bar, but you get creative with it like Persona does. You can look at a nice flat bar like this and start piecing together how much you're hitting for and percentages and how many hits you need, but the little heart bars in P5 only kind of give you an idea of proportion. And because of that, you're never quite sure if this is going to be the killing blow on a boss or not. It's the best of both worlds, and it gives a perception of your progress unlike the 9999 sponges of the world. And look, if anything, I hope the takeaway here today is not that big numbers are evil. This scene would be nowhere near as iconic if Cloud was throwing 6s and 7s, right? Obviously, there is a time and place for big boy damage, and to a certain extent, what values a developer chooses to represent damage is a stylistic choice. Not every game is as cute and whimsical as Paper Mario or Bug Fables. Not every card game wants to be as D&D rooted as Magic does. But I think it's vital that if a game chooses the larger number style, that it takes the steps to make those values mean something. And for that attack to land as cataclysmic as it truly is. Hello, my children. Thank you as always for watching the show. I hope your summer has been just as spectacular as it possibly can be. If you enjoyed what you saw here today and want to see more, be sure to like the video, share it, subscribe, let me know if you've experienced the Puny Paradox down below, and deal 9,999 damage to that subscribe button. What has become of me? And if you just can't get enough, for $1 a month, you can get tons of bonus content on my Patreon page. Weekly updates, bloopers, creative feedback, exclusive editing live streams, it's all there, link in the description. A critical thanks to this month's featured patrons. Moosty, Blue Gandalf, Noiacon, Mr. One-Up Machine, The Dead Cell, David Lucas, Bio Music Man, and ATK. Thanks again for watching. Check out more of my work here. Take care and have yourself a damn good one.
Oh, and please, please buy something from Big Bad Toy Store. I have a Cloud, I need a Tifa. The more you buy, the more credit I get. So please, please do this for me.